Monitoring food insecurity is at the heart of FAO's mandate, and FAO has a long tradition of monitoring food insecurity worldwide. Since 1999 we have published the prevalence of undernourishment on an annual basis for most developing countries in the world in the publication The State of Food Insecurity. And this indicator has been chosen to be one of the official indicators to monitor the Millennium Development Hunger Target. So it has become the official indicator for measuring hunger worldwide. Ever since I joined FAO, my division has made a concerted effort to improve the capacity of FAO to measure food insecurity. On one side, revising the methodology for the estimation of the prevalence of undernourishment, or the official indicator for measuring the MDG hunger target, and to provide a suite of food insecurity indicators to complement this measure. We are aware of the problems and limitations of the prevalence of undernourishment. That's why we have proposed a suite of indicators. But we are also aware that the available indicators are not enough, especially to measure certain dimensions of food insecurity. I'm talking about food access. And for this reason, we have decided to promote the Voices of the Hungry project.
The FIES, which is the tool developed by the Voices of the Hungry project, measures access to food, the ability of people to obtain the food that they need. And traditionally, there was an idea that you could observe what people eat, so measure food consumption, collect information on the actual diets of what people eat. But that proved to be quite challenging, because the information on food consumption is very costly to collect, and you should collect data very often to analyze also seasonality and other phenomena. So soon it was clear that if we wanted to have a measure of food access, we should take a different view, a different avenue. And the avenue was made possible by anthropological research that was conducted at Cornell, University of Cornell, in which people started to analyze the food insecurity as an experience, as a lived condition. So Kathy Radimer, a researcher at Cornell, interviewed women in the rural area upstate New York, asking, what does it mean to live food insecurity?
I was a graduate student at Cornell University at the end of the 1980s when Dr. Kathy Campbell, and her doctoral student, Kathy Radimer, were finishing up a research project in which they aimed to understand how hunger was experienced by hungry people in the United States. They were asking the question, there's hunger in the United States. There was clearly an increase in people seeking food assistance and going to food banks. And so it was obvious that hunger was on the rise in the United States. I was witnessing this. My own research was related to it, but they created a series of questions based on research, open-ended conversations with people in the United States, people in the state of New York, actually, rural New York. So based on the words of the people that they talked to, they created a series of questions, a set of questions, and then applied these closed-ended questions in surveys and tested the results and came up with a questionnaire for measuring hunger. And that instrument later formed the theoretical basis for the United States Household Food Security Measure that has been applied on a national level in the United States population since 1995 by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So that was really the first national experience-based food security measure, and which inspired other national food security measures. And I happen to be living in Brazil. I currently live in Brazil. I was living in Brazil when Lula da Silva was elected president and declared ending hunger to be his government priority. So as a result of that, Ana Segal, Dr. Ana Segal, a researcher from the University of Campinas in Brazil, and Rafael Pérez Escamilla, who was a visiting professor at the time, they recognized the need for a way to measure hunger, to monitor the policies of the Brazilian government.
Nós começamos, de fato, pensar no desenvolvimento de uma escala de medidas de segurança alimentar no Brasil a partir do lançamento do programa Fome Zero em 2003. Nós estudamos o programa, eu e o professor Rafael Pérez Escamilla, na Universidade de Campinas, e observamos que não havia nenhum instrumento de acompanhamento e avaliação dessa política tão importante naquela ocasião. Com isso, desenvolvemos o estudo com outras universidades nas grandes regiões do Brasil, buscando contemplar diferentes culturas alimentares, diferentes situações socioeconômicas, e o que resultou numa escala tanto adequada para populações urbanas quanto rurais, porque o trabalho todo foi desenvolvido tanto em área urbana quanto rural, e essa escala, ao final, ela foi assumida ou adotada pelo Instituto Nacional de Estatística, que no Brasil é o IBGE, que fez um primeiro estudo nacional sobre segurança alimentar e fome no Brasil em 2004, e cujos resultados foram muito importantes, né, para a reavaliação, ou pelo menos para o entendimento da importância daquelas políticas que foram elaboradas e iniciadas em 2003. E acabou culminando também, junto com outras experiências de outros países, com a elaboração de uma escala latino-americana de segurança alimentar, que também é uma iniciativa muito importante, porque ela estimula os diversos países a buscar adequação das suas políticas em função de diagnósticos diretos de segurança alimentar. Toda essa experiência de utilizar uma escala de medida direta de segurança alimentar acabou também por estimular organismos internacionais, especialmente a FAO, que está tratando agora do desenvolvimento ou de uma adequação de uma escala mais simplificada para medir a insegurança alimentar no mundo, também de forma direta. Então, eu penso que nós temos um espectro interessante, né, que tem as experiências nacionais, tem as cooperações internacionais entre países e tem agora um movimento no sentido de disponibilizar um instrumento para avaliação direta da segurança alimentar, globalmente falando.
When the main work of extending this measurement methodology into Latin America, the development of what became known as the Latin American Caribbean Food Security Scale, when that work began, I teamed up with other researchers in the United States and in Brazil and Colombia, and worked together with them extending this methodology into Latin America. So I was gaining some international experience as this went along. Then about 2 years before I retired from the United States Department of Agriculture, the Voices of the Hungry project contacted me and asked if I would be willing to sit on a panel to give some counsel to their initial considerations of whether this methodology could work in the sort of project that has become the Voices of the Hungry. The Food Insecurity Scale and the measurement process that has been developed by the Voices of the Hungry is not really different in kind from earlier work that's been done using this experiential measure of food insecurity. That is, the scale is a direct descendant of the Household Food Security Scale, that it influenced other scales It was modified somewhat in the Latin America Caribbean scale. That scale, in turn, the adult items in the Latin America Caribbean scale, basically became the Food Insecurity Experience Scale. So the scale itself is not new. There are some new things about the project. First of all, in the past, anytime we needed to say, well, is our data collected in, say, Iran or Cuba comparable with data collected in the United States, we're only dealing with two scales. And so we say, well, we take one of them as a standard and then we compare the other one to it. But in FIES, in the Voices of the Hungry project, we're collecting data in about 150 countries. So there is no single standard. So one of the technical challenges early on then was, well, how do we make all of these measures across all these countries in different languages and different cultures, how do we make them comparable so that when we say X% of people or of adults in this country are food insecure and Y% in that country, that those are really comparing apples and apples. So that was probably the biggest technological challenge or statistical challenge of the Voices of the Hungry project.
The possibility to measure something that cannot be observed directly, as this concept of food insecurity that we are approaching, is made possible by a statistical method that is called item response theory. It's, just to make a parallel, it's the same method that is used to measure an attitude, a psychological attitude, or a condition only through observing some of the symptoms. And it's a very powerful means of obtaining proper measurement of things that cannot be observed directly. And we borrowed this methodology and applied to the food insecurity area, following in the tradition developed in the United States.
There are some distinctives, in some ways by accident, of the Food Insecurity Experience Scale as we're using it in the Voices of the Hungry project. This scale can be applied, and usually is applied, in national surveys as a household measure. So we ask, did you or anyone else in the household experience something? Were you hungry but didn't eat because you didn't have enough money for food, for example? But it's a household level, so it's about you and other adults in the household, or any of the children in the household. Because of the character of the Gallup World Poll, which is the carrier of our Voices of the Hungry survey, the Gallup World Poll is a sample of adults in each country. It's not a household survey. And as such, we needed to modify the questionnaire then to apply just to the individual being interviewed, who is the randomly selected person from that population to represent a number of thousands of other people in the population. So we needed to ask that person about their own experience of food insecurity. This was not particularly difficult to do, and it has been done before, but never on a scale like this. This doesn't provide any this didn't create any particular technical challenges, but it does provide some interesting opportunities. Because we have individual level measures, we can, for example, compare between men and women, between married men and married women, who should, in theory, represent the same couples statistically. They're not interviewed, we only interview one adult in each household, but statistically they're sampling the same population, so that we can begin to learn something about how food insecurity affects men and women differently, even in the same household. The point at which this project will really get exciting is when we release the official statistics on prevalence of food insecurity in 150 countries. And we can begin to look at how those prevalences are associated with child mortality, undernutrition, and other health indicators that we really care about, and that in some ways are the reasons that we care about food insecurity. It will also allow us to look at how food insecurity is associated with income and employment and government policies, so that we begin to understand more about what causes and prevents food insecurity. So that's what we're really looking forward to.
The project has two objectives. One is to allow FAO to produce in a very cost-effective way new measures of food insecurity in all countries in the world. But the other one is to promote a broader adoption of this measurement approach by providing technical assistance, capacity development in terms of also tools like software to analyze the data. The questionnaire is available in more than 200 different languages or dialects. Everybody can pick it up from our website and use it in their survey. So our dream is that everywhere in the world, when there is a need to monitor food insecurity, the FIES will be the standard that is used.